That's big enough there. But we, as part of the quarterly, we always have the awards, and so definitely encourage you to think about the different awards that we have. We have the Mogul, the Freestyle, and People First Award. So definitely read through those emails, look at the criteria. There's got to be one of each that comes to mind, and everyone here should have a team that is knocking things out of the park, an individual who's really demonstrating the values that are outlined in the award. And certainly, this is one where maybe not everyone is, but notice someone who's a people first. Doesn't have to be your own manager. It could be anyone in the practice that is meeting those qualifications. Think about that. Encourage everyone to nominate in those categories. Let's definitely recognize those who are doing good work. Any other announcements? Let's do that I have. All right. That's it.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Joe. We'll be doing a very short slide on a couple of bios on me and the other two interns. But we'll go ahead and get started about what this presentation is about. So for the past 10 weeks, Robert, Mac, and I have been working on a small application to turn an Excel sheet into something a little bit visually nicer. And we're going to talk a little bit about how this internship program was structured, who was involved in that decision-making process. We'll talk about the actual project we worked on along with the live demo, and then after that we'll have a little bit of a discussion in QA, and if people are genuinely curious, we can do a little bit of a code dive into what we worked on this summer. So with that, Tim, do you want to come up?
Sure.
Matt.
All right.
Or Matt.
Well, both.
Sure. So, last summer, Seattle XM ran an internship program. They built the My Time mobile app as kind of a pilot into an internship program. This summer, we were also allowed to hire 3 interns. We ran some recruiting fair stuff that Andrew Furman did. We posted on a bunch of job boards. We had something like, do we have a slide on
Yep.
The stats.
on the stats?
Wait, go ahead. Skip it.
Well,
Hold on. Okay.
There we go.
So, as you can see, we had 386 applicants. So, this is really the top 1% here, guys.
Literally.
We had a ton of people help us out doing phone screens. A lot of senior engineers stepped out, got trained in how to do phone screens. Then we did 14 on-site interviews across 2 different afternoons. So we had a lot of help there as well. So thanks to everyone that helped with phone screens and interviews. And then finally, we selected and hired 3 interns. I don't know how to use the buttons, Joe.
Alright, so we got Robbie, some quick facts. I'll let you take a hot commando.
Is that JSON?
No. We got Matt.
That's the thing with our pull requests. So let's do the hobbies here. There have been some epic pull requests this summer, by the way.
I saw one that had like 200 comments on it. So that may be like a record somewhere.
Yeah.
You want to talk about this one, Sean?
Sure. So just really quickly, we obviously introduced the 3 interns. First of all, thanks guys for spending your summer with Slough. We're really excited that you came to join us. And as you'll see throughout when we talk about the app, what we were able to deliver, Sean's going to tell us a little bit about why the staffing app, and then talk a little bit about how we pivoted on, within the staffing app to deliver what you'll see here at the end of the day. It really has laid not only a foundation for what Slough can take and make a staffing app as a foundation, just in concepts as well as a foundational platform. But more importantly, this has been Tim mentioned an opportunity for people to say, get exposure and experience with phone screens. It's been a chance for people that haven't yet had an opportunity to guide people and be like, act as a people manager for the interns. And so we've really taken advantage of this to not only hopefully broaden the horizons of our 3 interns, but also a number of people in the practice have gotten a chance to kind of stretch and do different things than normally they're able to do. And our focus, as you'll see throughout this, we were at least, actually I'd say more interested in making sure that we worked with the interns, gave them a chance to learn about slalom, learn about how we do things. Tim mentioned the 200 PR comments, and a lot of that is just, again, we wanted to make sure that we're instilling upon them as well as our people kind of the slalom way of doing things. And so given a chance to kind of balance, speed versus kind of doing things the right way, clearly we erred on the side of working with them and kind of making this a learning opportunity. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so, sit over here. So why the staffing app? I don't know if you guys remember, but we do a lot of staffing in Excel as far as trying to manage the process. And for those of you that are involved, we spend a ton of time doing it twice a week. And it's a little bit less than ideal. And if you've ever seen the board in the PAL office, that is also part of the process, if you can believe it. So what did we want to do? Actually try and modify that. Well, we actually realized when we actually scoped that all out, it became really large and probably not entirely accomplishable in the summer with the interns. So we got some direction from Seattle as well to focus on predictions. And so using the information that we have in the staffing spreadsheet, how can we actually use that and get a better visualization on where are the opportunities, where are they in the pipeline, how many are at different stages. Also thinking about kind of what does our staffing look like over, if you project forward, a lot of the leadership looks at kind of what's the next 6 weeks look like. So do we have a cliff? Do we have people that are, are we going up or down in utilization? Do we have things to worry about? Are things kind of trending where we expect? So I think on the next couple slides you'll see what that turned into, but that's really the idea, and hopefully we can use it to augment the near-term process and kind of think about it more proactively and make some better decisions.
About the selection process.
Oh yeah, so I don't know if everybody remembers, we pitched, I don't know, four or five ideas?
Yep.
Yeah, so we pitched 4 or 5 ideas.
Well, I think we had like 20-some submissions overall. So thanks for all the people that submitted ideas. Presented 4 or 5.
4 or 5, we selected the staffing app and then kind of ran that through with some voting and then did some internal research with the XD group as well as a lot of the people that are heavily involved in a lot of the PALs and some of the SPs to kind of generate some thoughts on what that should look like. So that's kind of a little bit.
And this was just the overall timeline for the internship. So like I had mentioned towards the beginning of the presentation, it's about 10 weeks long. And we had 4 sprints, so 2 weeks per sprint. And the first week we were kind of onboarded with the technologies we were going to be using, looking over tutorials and getting us up to speed. And this final week was just kind of cleaning up everything that was left over from sprint 4, polishing everything for today's presentation. Yeah.
So this is just kind of a slide showing everyone involved. Obviously on the right you have your 3 interns. I do want to make a special call out to the Chicago XM bench. We had a ton of people that had a week or 2 weeks on the bench that were able to lend their help, like Weston, Ryan Bossler, a variety of other people, Cantola, I see him. So thank you to all those people, because without you guys, I don't think we'd be doing this presentation today. And then on the top we have Sean, who is our product owner. Matt and I were in every stand-up almost, and then a variety of other people from stakeholders and other senior leaders.
All right, so let's get down there.
All right, so as Sean was saying, we have this spreadsheet currently that holds all the information for staffing, and it's kind of hard to read through. There are 17 columns on one sheet and 18 columns on another. And so we were tasked with building out a UI, an user interface to visualize and interact with the data from that sheet. So this app over here is the Opportunities app. This allows you to quickly visualize and see the opportunities for any given you have projects that are like at 80%, so these projects might not be signed yet. You have projects that are 20%, so they might exist, there might have been some form of contact made, but nothing's really official yet. And it shows like how many people like could go onto those projects and how many opportunities there are for those. And so we built that out with the data from the sheets. And then we were tasked with building out the utilization report. And what the utilization report shows you is the amount of people who are utilized for any given like practice area. So say you just have like software engineers, you could have like whatever utilization they are, so you can filter based on that. And then we didn't have enough time to use the update feed because we are not adding anything to the chart from our app right now. So we built out another widget, which is a roll-offs widget, which you can again filter by practice, showing the amount of people who are rolling off in any given week. And these are all weeks in the future. So the useful data is, how many people are going off projects next week, or how many people are going to be utilized in the weeks to come. And some of the technologies that we use to build these. So our backend database is PostgreSQL. We use Liquid-based Vagrant to set all that up. All of our backend stuff was all Java. There were lots of tests written in Spock. And all of our application, all the front-end widgets are built in D3, all hitting REST endpoints, getting back JSON tables, and then filtering them on the front end.
So I think you can get appreciation, especially with that GIF there, of the mountains was appropriate, right? The hills are alive with all these frameworks that these three gentlemen really had very limited to no exposure to. So it was a very steep learning curve, and they did a great job of ramping up on all these different things.
Okay, so I'm giving a demo, and we just actually deployed this about like 20 minutes ago, so I think so to start out, I mean, the data on the endpoints and within the app is sensitive. You don't want people coming in and getting into it, so we put in some rudimentary authentication here. So for right now, we just have it go to username and password. The goal eventually is to get this link to like Slalom's network and have it actually authenticate with your credentials. Unfortunately, we were not able to do this in our time here, but maybe some of you will work on this later. So we log in, and then you get this page. It's populated with the data that was already in there previously. But if you want to put in your own data because you don't know what that data was, and right now we don't have each person have a session. There's just one global session, so you will see other people's data, and that will be updated in the future, hopefully. But I have these three files here that we can look at. We can upload. This one is a problem with the spreadsheet, and it tells you that it was not uploaded successfully. It did not have the right number of columns, and there was no way to handle that. So it just crapped out and just canceled that. So the second file is there's major errors, but those are handleable. So basically, in the spreadsheet, there are some columns which you can handle if they're not there, and there are some that you can't. So the ones that you can handle are here, and they say we couldn't handle it, and we're reporting the row, and we just won't input data from that row. And there are some here that are handleable, and we handle them by putting in null for the value. And we give the user feedback because we don't want them to just not know what's going on the back end. And finally, we have the real data. For last week, I believe, this is the real spreadsheet. So what's happening here, it takes a while because it's actually hitting a RESTful endpoint on the back, inputting all this, going through hundreds of lines of the spreadsheet and inputting the data. And then we get the feedback back from it in a response and an error code. So hopefully this should update soon. It takes a little bit longer on AWS than it does on our local machines. And this is taking quite a while.
The first rule is always bump up your instance type for the medium. This is the extra large. There we go.
Did it upload?
I think it's literally still uploading.
You're up to 191 so far.
Wait. Nope.
Fingers crossed. And
How many opportunities should there be total in that spreadsheet?
in the spreadsheet, I think there's like 500 or so.
You're almost halfway there then. I logged in. It shows the partial data on the website.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, so it's just hitting the endpoint and it's going through all those sheets. And I think actually something that takes a while is we're logging all the errors, and we ran some tests and found out that the I/O from that actually causes a lot of time that it takes.
So there's some tuning that we can do.
Yeah, there's some tuning. There's some optimization that can be done on the back end.
And perhaps even some right sizing of the instance. During our testing when we had smaller spreadsheets, optimized for a smaller instance type. But, if the real data takes something a little bit larger, you certainly could be doing that if it's, particularly if your I/O constraints do something that's a little more I/O optimized might be something to improve it.
And eventually, hopefully something that stops you from closing this modal box when you're uploading something, because you do want to see the errors, and it is taking a while right now. How far is it?
Let's see. I stopped refreshing because that suits me. 235.
It hasn't been going up.
Yeah.
So maybe
That's
it's-
close.
So maybe it did die, and we'll continue with what we have right now.
Don't close it. Don't close it.
235 is a nice number.
Okay. Well, we'll just go with the data that we have right here. So all of these, actually, it did populate. This is all the data. This is correct. There's some stuff that still needs to get done, but this is the correct data. This is what we wanted. So Mac explained these are all filterable by market. These ones you can click on like any of these markets, and it will filter the data. So yeah, you get a sense of where the opportunities are in the pipeline for each of these markets. I think more useful for somebody who's staffing people is these utilization and roll-offs widget, and these are both filterable by practice. So, I mean, DCC, yeah, DCC, you can see that in this week we're using like 75% of our resources, and then you'd expect that it would go down because stuff that's later hasn't been signed yet. But I mean, that's pretty good right there, and you can see like it's going to help for staffing managers when they can see the cliffs. And then roll-offs, it tells a similar tale because it's also about when people are rolling off. So if they're rolling off, they're typically not going to be utilized unless they're immediately going on to their primary. So we can filter that by DCC, and we see that in this current week we have 5 roll-offs and then none until September 5th, the week of September 5th. And then this will also be linked to the Slalom network, and you'll have your own image, your own name, and your own title there. These are going to be fleshed out in the future, but we didn't work on those yet. And then we have a logout button, and we come back to our login page. Yeah.
Yeah, talk about this going forward. So, some cool foundational stuff. Obviously, as we mentioned before, a lot of the frameworks, there's an awful lot of work to kind of lay the groundwork on that, especially for 3 gentlemen who, all of that was brand new. So you saw just, the number of sprints. It wasn't, a long project. 1 week of onboarding this last week, and then was it 2 sprints in between? 4 sprints in between. So, a lot of behind the scenes kind of thing too about, being able to adjust the database. They're setting up the data model, being able to interact with the database. So the good news is now that we've got this foundation, we've got sort of a location to store the data in our database. We've got that all modeled out. We've got some RESTful endpoints to handle the widgets. We've also got the foundation that will enable, I don't know if you saw at the very end where you kind of had all those different things on the side. The goal here would be to create a prototype that we could manage the staffing assignments as a prototype to say what could the next generation slalom staffing application look like. I don't know if you've seen some of the emails, but Slalom is changing our CRM system and looking at kind of ways to overhaul kind of our opportunities and how we align people to opportunities. And having a prototype to that could be pretty valuable for us to say, as we're going to invest in a real deal CRM system-based staffing application, what are some of the things that would prove useful? And that's an intent of the next step of the prototyping. So some of the further development, Eric Chavez has volunteered. He's been involved with helping out the internship program. He's volunteered to carry this forward. He's going to be our technical owner going forward. So thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. But of course, Eric is but a man. He can't do this all on by himself. So the plan is to leverage Chicago cross-market bench for modifications and further development. So those additional features, we talked about some of the optimizations and tuning. Eric's going to take charge of that, and then as we have people that have time on their hands, either bench or otherwise, ask you to get involved in that. So this is a prime opportunity for some bench project work. And then also implementing the remaining pages to show people, opportunities, and alignment. So that's really where we're saying, I want to get a view by person. So if I'm a people manager, I want to be able to sort of see what is Rishi's current assignment, what are the opportunities we have aligned for him. I can go in and kind of look at the Rishi, perspective. Or maybe I'm someone who's owning an opportunity saying, I better try to find staff for this. We're going to start up with client XYZ. What are the roles that are available? So making sure I'm entering the right roles, what do I need on this project, and seeing who's currently aligned or not. That really be sort of the opportunities and the alignments portions of the application. So we've built out all of the underlying plumbing for that. Now it's a matter of kind of building up the front end and some of the services to get the details that are specific to those tabs. But as you saw in the widgets, obviously we already had a sense for what our opportunities, what our alignments, otherwise we wouldn't be able to do the utilization measurements that we're doing in those widgets. Integrate further into the practice. So what we'd like to do is take this and have new data becomes available each week as we update our staffing alignment. So rather than kind of forking off and having this thing be off on its own, the direction we went is to interoperate with that staffing spreadsheet. So going forward, uploading the staffing spreadsheet so we can have those widgets and measurements be current. And then also as we implement the proof of concept on people, opportunities, alignment, being able to use that internally as we're trying to figure out who will we align, and then we'll essentially export that information out to send to keep that master spreadsheet updated. The reason to do that is we still need to interoperate with the official process. We're not looking to replace that yet. The longer term replacement is on the horizon. The good thing about this is it'll give us a chance to kick the tires on newer ways of doing things and be able to provide suggestions and input as a sort of a working prototype for that next generation system. And then, as we say, you're gathering further requirements and new use cases, and that'll be definitely good input for the next steps. And so for the interns, of course, tomorrow is their last day with us here this summer, but hopefully it's not permanently goodbye. We want to keep them engaged. They're finishing up. They got more studies to do, some more than others. Just meaning in terms of how far they are. And we're going to invite them to our parties, our quarterlies, our meetings, holiday party, etc. Keep them engaged in the slalom culture, and hopefully when they're at a point where they're looking at careers, we'd love to have a follow-up conversation and remind them of their good summer here at slalom. So, cool.
All right. So we kind of figured this would be the longer part of the presentation to kind of open it up for discussion. I wanted to briefly go over kind of my overview of my experience here with slalom, the internship process, and then just generally the project. And then if anyone has any questions, we could jump right into that and then segue into the code dive if people are interested. So for me personally, I think it's easy to compartmentalize my experience here into kind of two buckets. One would be the interview process and slalom culture here, and the other would be the project selection and overall how that relates to my educational value here. So for the former, I would say that it was pretty clear up front from the interviewing process what the culture was like here. So it was made very apparent towards the beginning we're all about educational values and making sure that people are constantly and continually learning as they're working here. And another big part was this work-life balance and focusing on doing the right thing for your clients And I heard that, several times. I looked at that through like the job description. I was like, okay, it sounds nice. But through every interview I've had here, everyone was reflecting the same idea. And like the whole internship process here, I think reflects that too, right? So the first week we were here, we were given the opportunity to sit down with developers and say, here's what we'd recommend you read to better understand this framework or this tool set. And we had people who were taking time out of their projects while they were aligned to a certain project to sit down with us, help us with pull requests, help us understand projects and technologies. And overall, I think it was a pretty phenomenal experience. It felt as though I was definitely getting more value out of it as an educational opportunity than I think the company was from like our project. Obviously, Tim had mentioned like, if the whole end goal was to build a really good project staffing application, they wouldn't have onboarded interns for that. But at the same time, you still have the opportunity. It's like lay the foundation for this proof of concept out, while at the same time providing some opportunity for people who might be interested in onboarding, and help them come up to speed with more modern technologies they wouldn't learn in a university setting. So because of all that, it was for me personally a very phenomenal experience. I really enjoyed my time here. And in terms of the project was pretty phenomenal as well. I feel as though it's something that was valued a lot by a lot of different people at different levels of the company. Obviously, from a very senior management perspective, this would be nice sometime in the future to be able to have this information to make these larger decisions about who gets aligned to certain projects and how we view just like general practices throughout the company. But even for me personally, like I loved working with the tech stack. A lot of it was stuff I hadn't seen before, but it was really fun learning things that you'll actually use in the real world as opposed to some outdated technologies you learn at university. Yeah, I mean those are generally my thoughts. Did you want to add anything, Robbie or Matt?
I didn't really want to add anything, but you guys. But if you guys have any questions, now's the time. Yeah.
So for each of you, what was the most challenging piece of this internship? Other than working with Tim.
Robbie, you're to my left. Why don't you go ahead?
Was it challenging? Come back to me.
Okay, I'll go. I think for me, one of the things I realized was there's a balance to be struck between delivering something that has business value and learning at the same time. Obviously, being an intern, there's a huge priority on me learning new technologies and understanding how software development occurs in industry settings, specifically here at Sloan. But that wasn't always the only priority. At the same time, we had to build this application. And if I could do it over again and I had like unlimited time, I would love to like go through all the documentation again. I would love to touch more parts of the stack. But as it turns out, we have to ultimately ship this proof of concept. And so at certain points, you have to say, okay, I'm just going to focus on this part a little bit. I'll let other people who have kind of more in-depth knowledge on this side work on that part. So to me, that was kind of challenging, striking that fine balance. But ultimately, I think we struck it pretty well.
One of the most difficult things for me, I think, was switching from that, like, okay, I'm coding this to just like work right now versus I need it to look nice and be good enough where someone can go back to it and edit it later. So that was a pretty difficult like switch from like being in college mode where you're like, oh, I just need to get this project done, to I need to be able to get this done and someone has to be able to read it later. And I think I'm still sort of struggling with that a little bit, but I'm definitely a lot better than I was when I got here.
I'm ready. Kind of what he's saying is just like in college, you never have people look at your code, really. So actually, it was a shock having people like comment on my code on PRs. Like, even if it's functioning, if you want it to look nicer and be extensible and modular, that's kind of a shock when you don't have people criticizing your code.
Don't criticize it. Right.
Critique the code.
Critique the code. Criticize.
Yeah, so that's it's something to get used to, but it definitely is really beneficial for your progression as an engineer, and also just as other way to see the way to code things and to work through problems.
How do you think this experience will shape your next year in university, and like how will that kind of play out for your interaction with your peers?
I think looking at other people's code too, like with PRs, when doing group projects, it's kind of easy to distribute work among other like teammates and not actually touch parts of the code when you have group projects. But I think it's really important for every person to kind of touch the code, even if they don't write the entire thing. You want to get exposure to all the different things, so all the different parts of the project. So I think that will be different. And then also, I want to provide feedback on people's code. Like I want to, just as much as I want people to provide feedback for my code, I want to also help other people. So like that.
I think for me personally, this is going to sound kind of bad, but focusing less on academics and kind of more on like personal progress. So technologies I'm particularly interested in that I won't be learning in a university setting. And instead of saying, okay, I need an extremely high GPA, taking time away from that, because I can work on personal projects on my own that I think will work on technologies that I'll use in the future. And I've been to hackathons previously, and it's really fun to like build something around this really nebulous idea, like, oh, wouldn't it really be cool if I could get these APIs to work together and build something that's just kind of nifty. To me, this kind of, I guess, adds a focusing lens on that and says, if you're going to do that, make sure you're learning a new technology as you're doing it, and that there's more purpose behind it. Like building something cool, it's building something cool with a purpose, and that purpose is like being able to learn a new technology and say at the end of that event that you progressed in some way.
I think that this has like really changed how I'm going to do work at school. I'm probably going to start using Get a lot more often now. I haven't used it that much in the past, and when I used it, I didn't really understand it, but Get's really helpful. And I'm definitely going to start using it when I go back.
This guy was on to something.
I feel like in college you're more like centered on like certain things. It's like you take like Java class or like JavaScript class. How is it working with like, it's like you're working in the Spring framework with Java and you're actually like talking to Liquid-based and like other external stuff. How is that working in like more of a confined setting, but with like a number of tools, like 4 or 5 tools, but just with like one little small feature?
I think you learn in isolation elements of the stack. So you might have a databases class, and then you might have like a Java class, but usually you're not focusing on like newer frameworks or technologies that are being used. And even things like version control or testing is based on like a lot of other people that I've talked to aren't focused on them at all. So I felt as though this internship gave me an opportunity to integrate everything together in a setting that makes sense, right? Because in a classroom setting, you can say something like, you might use exceptions to kind of better handle user errors that they may view. I'm like, okay, that's great. There's not really a use case for me to do that. But having seen it here and seeing like, oh, you might want to pass that back to the front end through a controller, so you're uploading these. Like, it gives me that very specific use case where it makes kind of the theoretical much more applicable, I think, in an engineering practice.
Yeah. Cool.
Ian, go.
Okay, so this whole person is kind of going back to what you were saying earlier about it's different to write something that just did work and then get something that's easy for others to understand. I just want to make a quick comment on that. Like one of the first things I was actually taught was exactly what you're saying. If one thing did work, it's another thing that did work well. You'll still have issues down the road with it. And also too, I kind of want to ask you guys a little bit about how do you feel like this internship kind of helped you with kind of getting around in the professional world, working in a kind of professional environment and everything. I mean, I'm sure that must have been quite a different experience with that.
Yeah, we talk a little bit about sort of the differences between kind of academic code and kind of professional software development and delivery. Maybe you guys can talk a little bit about it, kind of just getting into work for school versus, but maybe touch a little bit more on some of the differences between kind of being a professional software developer versus kind of, the academic exposure.
I was also kind of talking about like, kind of socially too, not just, the work you do, but just kind of the whole, feel of it, kind of how you interact with people or, how you, treat work versus, how you treat school, kind of going beyond the code.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a lot more fun than staying up till like 2 or 3 a.m. Working on algorithms homework or something like that. So I'd say like my experience has been like a lot more fun. I feel like my code is actually doing something instead of like, oh yeah, just like sort this table and give it back to me. Great. There's value in what I do instead of just like I'm turning it in for a grade. Now there's values for the grades, but it's not the same. Like I can't go to. There's like no managers at school. There's your professor. There's no, it's gonna be like great job. Like okay, great, you did the work. Like that's what you're here to do at school. If you add a little extra feature in school, it doesn't really have like a huge value, but if you're able to add a feature in like a business environment, someone's gonna look at that and go, wow, this is like really cool. Yeah.
To your point about kind of like the more social sphere of it, I'd say one of the things that turned out to be really convenient was just how many engineers and talented engineers are here. And if you don't really strike up a conversation anywhere, you're not going to meet anyone here, not realize kind of the value that's here. And I think a really specific example of that is when Mac and I were working on the front end and we were integrating D3 with React, there were a lot of issues we were experiencing with manipulating the DOM directly. And by off chance, Weston was working in the atrium there. And I was like, hey, you know JavaScript, right?
That's an understatement.
And so I was like, yeah, what kind of error are you having? And so the problem that we had been working on for like the past 2 days, he had solved in about 10 minutes for us. So that was nice, that helps our sprint help by about like twice as much.
I can comment. I was just, my favorite difference between anything personal or academic and professional is like the accountability of it. When you're working on stuff for school or you're working on personal projects, there's really no accountability except to yourself. So there's motivation to work, but not as much. But then when you're working in a professional setting, when you have people who are counting on you to actually get your code or the tasks that you pulled over to actually have them done by the end of the sprint, I think that's a really powerful motivator, and I think it really helps me to actually feel motivated. Really.
So across like 4 or 5 sprints that you guys have worked on this project, did you find like one particular instance that you guys found rewarding?
Like one specific sprint that we...
Or just like anything across those sprints that you, like a feature that you worked on or something that you found really rewarding and you felt really happy about?
Right. We worked in the front end.
The first sprint wasn't really an upper. I think we booked. How many story points did we book for that?
I think we closed the story.
0. Again, kind of going back to that, a lot of foundational work, right? And so there's a lot of things that weren't necessarily user stories that needed to get done, across all those different technologies.
Matt says this to clients all the time.
I think some of the most rewarding stuff that I saw was like finally getting data back to the front end, where you like see, okay, we imported the spreadsheet. Good. Is it actually going to work? And actually seeing it displayed is a lot of fun.
I think I have kind of 2 responses. Number one is towards the beginning of the internship when we were learning all about like Redux and Spring Boot, it's kind of hard to understand the value that those bring to you. But as we started to get a larger and larger code base, it really made a lot more sense why we compartmentalize our code into kind of the project structure that we did. And it made it really satisfying to see like, oh, these tools are actually useful. They're not just kind of like enterprise, cotton candy or something that makes, so like being able to see the tools that you're using as you progress and gain more insight and appreciation for them as the internship progressed was really, really nice. But I think for me personally, the biggest thing for me was in the past couple of weeks when we had, the major front end built out and we had most of the back end logic done, to be able to actually get the real spreadsheet data in and say like, this is actually business value that I feel as though Slalom can get out of this right now. And it might not be, a fully polished product, but it's definitely something that I personally feel like really proud of, that we got something working and functional and super useful. But also it's just really gratifying to know that the company that brought you on for 10 weeks is going to be able to get something out of what you built. So it's great.
Just curious on your thoughts on like going through the project lifecycle.
I'm assuming in your college courses, you're not doing full projects where you're having stand-ups and sprint planning and that kind of stuff.
I had an internship last summer where I was actually in a waterfall environment, and this summer obviously we weren't doing waterfall. It's very different. I felt, so I also have like another year of studying computer science under my belt, so it's not totally fair to say like this summer I was a lot more productive than last summer. But it felt as though there was definitely a lot more granularity in terms of what I was building. It wasn't just, here's the start of your internship, we want you to build this, and then end of internship, how far did you get? It's more of like every week you're held accountable to things that you yourself define, you yourself say this is what's important to us, and you work with other stakeholders. So I definitely see the value of the agile process, but more than that, I felt as though it made me more productive and generally happier.
Was going through it kind of what you expected it to be like? Were there differences from what you were taught or read about?
I actually work part-time during the school year at a research lab where we use an agile development cycle, but here was a little bit more refined in terms of having daily stand-ups and using online tools to kind of track issues and look at burn down. Before I thought like, oh, it was just kind of a nice different way to approach development, whereas now I feel as though I can like confidently say it's a better methodology, at least specifically for the project that we're doing.
So if we were to put you guys, like playing this out, next summer you guys are hired, here. And then we say you guys are now in charge of the next set of internship or interns. What would you change about the process to make it better for the interns and kind of, more aligned with your expectations?
Not to make it more aligned with our expectations, but I think something that I'd change would be maybe when you start, when your sprint has like a new technology that you haven't used, maybe have one of the senior engineers who have worked with that come in and say like, this is an example and you're free to play with this. So sometimes we would spend time thinking like React or something. So like we would not, like, because it was our first time using it, and we didn't have any base starting point. So it would be difficult to actually just learn stuff from the web and then also apply that. So I think if we had something relevant, like weekly or, when we're starting a new technology, something like that, that would help productivity, I think.
Little mini boot camps,
Yeah.
just-in-time mini boot camps could be helpful.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Anything else from?
Yeah, I think similar to what Robbie was saying, one of the things I had voiced a little bit earlier in the internship in terms of like, if we were to do this again next summer, how would we restructure it? I think one of the things that I struggled with the first week was, here are the technologies we're using, and then a lot of engineers had, these great links to resources about tutorials, but it was just kind of a blanket list of tutorials. So it's, hours and hours of videos, hours and hours of like sample projects. It's like, okay, which one do I choose? Which one do I prioritize? I think it would have been more helpful if there was almost like a micro curriculum constructed for that first week that says, here are the product features that we know we'll be using and want. So here are some tutorials that are centered around that. So we didn't use the entire Spring framework. We didn't really use that much of Redux, but we have those tutorials saying, you only need these parts, so let's have you learn these small parts first. And I realize there are trade-offs there, right? So you have to take people off of project time, and that costs the company money.
Yep.
But I think from our perspective, that would have been a much more helpful way to narrow down what we learned, and I think it would have led to a little bit faster sprint development.
Yeah, same as building off of both Joe and Robbie. There were times where I picked up a tutorial and it was like a version or 2 or 3 out of date. And I'd be like, why is this out of date? And then like I'll run it with that code, or like I'll write it with what I learned from that tutorial, and then in my PR it's like, I know Weston commented like, oh, like this is being deprecated, or like this is on the path to deprecation, it must be on top of that. And I'm like, wait a minute, I just like read this tutorial on how to do this. So yeah, having things that are like up to date and like mini explanations or examples would have been really helpful.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what were your expectations coming into this? And then were those expectations met, exceeded? Like how did things kind of align with your expectations?
To be honest, we didn't really know much when we were coming in.
In terms of like what we were doing.
Yeah. So it's hard to say expectations versus reality because the expectations, because we really didn't know what was going to happen. So yeah, I really can't say. 'Cause, I mean, maybe they can, but I didn't know what was going to happen when I got here on the first day.
Yeah, I think one of the struggles, I mean, we've talked about this with HR, was this being a pilot program, it's really hard to have a really clear schedule ahead of time in terms of the interview process, but also have a project selected before you even start that process. They were happening concurrently. So while it would have been nice to have known like very specific project vision, at the same time, it's also, I base my decision based off the culture here and based off talking to other engineers when I was interviewing here and how they kind of viewed working here. And I've also interviewed at other companies where they have even less of an idea of what they're doing and they end up just having interns sitting around all day. And I think one of the other things that I ended up talking to my roommate a few weeks ago about his experience, he's the mechanical engineering co-oping with the company, was he talks about, it was really nice this week, I had stuff to do. And I was like, I never had like a point during this internship where I didn't have something to do. And at times that can be really stressful, but more than anything, it was really nice because it meant that there was a clear project vision. There was all of these requirements set out ahead of time for me. And it just meant I was more engaged and I enjoyed my time here more.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I can do much better than that. I would say, like, I remember before I came into the internship, I had sent out an email, I think I was in contact with Andrew, and I had asked, is there anything I can, like, look at the first 2 weeks before I start here? And he's like, no, don't worry about it. It'll all like work out. Like, they'll teach you what you can do. And I was like, okay. But I got here the first week. I remember being like, I really wish I had pressed the point of like, what technologies are we going to be using? It was interesting to be thrown onto the project not having any clue of the like stack that we were using. And I had asked for like just a little bit of information.
Know what the stack was going to be 2 weeks
right.
before
Okay. Yeah. I guess that too. But so my expectation was like, okay, I'll like learn everything like really quickly. Like, my interview went pretty well. Like maybe I already know everything I'll need for that. No. But it was a lot of fun. And so that my takeaway is it's better than I had. It exceeds expectations.
We've heard sort of like their expectations as well as kind of, we're going to have exit interviews tomorrow also, just we'll get even more deep feedback. But we've learned a lot of slalom for going through our first internship program. There's a lot of things that I think that went well. There's some things that, next time we'd like to tweak a bit. And, I think the project planning and things, we were kind of waffling a little bit, honestly, between how much do we want to prescribe in terms of technology stack and how much do we want to have involve the interns as part of that. And, sort of the 11th hour we really landed on, there's an awful lot to absorb in just the learning how to do. So we were a little more prescriptive, but that was part of why we weren't as able to kind of communicate that as, I think at the time you'd asked, our thinking was, well, we want to involve you in that process, and I think rightly so, though, next time we would, plan that ahead and kind of be prescriptive about it with confidence, just because there's an awful lot to learn, and it's hard for you guys to make decisions on tech stack when it's all fairly new to you. What are the relative trade-offs of Redux versus Redux React versus Angular? Well, I haven't used either of them, so what are you asking me for, right? And so I think next time there's some things that we've learned from this go around. We could probably get ahead of some of those questions a bit, but it's also helped confirm some of the things that we thought would be helpful as well.
Yeah, it was cool not having to worry about it. Like, okay, 2 weeks till the internship, you don't want me to like read up on anything? All right, that's pretty easy to not read up on. Yeah, it's just awkward when I got here. It's like, oh yeah, all this stuff.
That was essentially us calling it audible. Our plan originally was to sort of not have it prescribed, and we thought, well, that will sort of set us even further behind in trying to get something out the door.
Yeah.
So we jumped ahead on that.
It's a great consulting experience though, because how many projects have people have put out where they had no idea how to use this tech stack? Now learn.
Yeah.
By tomorrow.
I think to the point though, given their experience, the context, like we could do a better job of outlining that for next year. And I just want to make sure that they understand that we hear what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff.
I was told there would be a song, like a barbershop type.
Yeah, do you want to start us off, Ritter?
Maybe we'll do it at the end of the day.
Oh, okay.
After the happy hour. Yeah.
I kind of asked Mac this in the elevator for yesterday, but are you guys looking forward to going back to school?
Do they have free beer at school?
No. If they do, they don't have enough of it, because then you never find it.
It's cheaper, but, well, it's not free, but
It's cheaper than free.
what? It's cheaper. They pay you.
They pay you this, right?
That's up to your head, Ron.
Yeah, so to your question, I am excited to go back because I think this gives me a better focus on what I should value in my academics and where I should be placing my time rather than just blanketly trying to do the best in all my classes, saying, realize that the cost of doing well in a class might often be not learning the technology or not actually being prepared for the workforce. So this definitely helped me with that. And yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Cool.